It's 4 in the afternoon on Tuesday, November 4th here in Korea. Welcome to our newscast. I'm Hwang Ji-hye. We begin with a special event that took place here in Seoul, where education experts from around the world gathered to discuss ways to improve global education. President Park Geun-hye was there, and she talked about fostering creative talents for her envisioned creative economy. Choi You-sun reports.
The zeal of Korean parents for their children's education is renowned. And it would be fair to say that this fervor and the rapid development of education in Korea have largely contributed to helping the country rise from the ashes in a matter of just decades. But President Park Geun-hye at a symposium co-organized by Seoul and the World Bank on Tuesday said the time has come for the Korean education system to transform in the face of new challenges in the 21st century. The president referred to her talks with World Bank President Kim Yong-kim last year, when they agreed that innovation and creativity were the foundations of sustainable growth, and that it's education that can foster such creative talents at the center of a creative economy.
저는 우리 교육이 혁신을 이루어낼 창의적인 아이디어와 도전 정신을 키워내는 원천이 되어야 한다고 생각합니다. 개개인의 잠재된 능력을 최대한 끌어올려서 아이디어와 열정으로 가득한 융합 인재를 길러내는 창의 인재 양성 교육으로 변해야 합니다.
Korea recently participated in the UN Global Education First Initiative and joined the Global Partnership for Education, evidence that the government wants to play a more active role in international efforts to enhance the quality of education in the developing world.
그동안 축적해온 교육의 노하우에 선진국의 우수 사례를 접목하고 이제까지의 교육 패러다임을 뛰어넘는 행복교육, 창의교육을 실현해서 우리 교육의 발전은 물론 세계 교육의 발전에도 기여해 나가기를 기대하고 있습니다.
Promoting Korea's hosting of the World Education Forum next May, President Park expressed hope that the participants will have meaningful discussions on making happy and creative education possible for the future generations. Choi You-sun, ARIRANG News.
And now over at another international event in Korea's port city of Busan, the International Telecommunication Union's meeting, which comes to a close in just 3 days, has adopted an agenda to promote the Internet of Things, taking the lead of the host country. Hwang Ji-hye reports.
The International Telecommunications Union, for the first time, adopted an agenda regarding the Internet of Things, which is proposed by this year's host, South Korea. IoT refers to the connection of devices and objects through the Internet, and Seoul had proposed that it be facilitated to prepare for the future. Less than 1% of these objects are currently connected to the Internet, but that number is expected to jump 10 times on the back of cloud computing and big data technologies, with the market size expanding by 5 times its current level to over $8 trillion by the year 2020. While the IoT stands to open new business opportunities for startups, supporting developing countries in their pursuit of the IoT remains a challenge for the ITU, as the resources in those nations are limited. According to the IoT index filed by the International Data Corporation last year, South Korea is the second most prepared country among G20 members after the United States, and with the latest adoption of its agenda, Seoul aims to expand its presence in setting global standards and supporting developing nations in IoT-related projects of ITU. Seoul's ICT Ministry has also designated IoT Week Korea 2014 for Wednesday to next Friday, where solutions and products related to IoT will be presented at multiple events at COEX and other locations around the capital and Busan. Hwang Ji-hye, ARIRANG News.
Deregulation is a key part of President Park Geun-hye administration's plan to boost the domestic economy. And as part of such efforts, the Korean government is easing restrictions within its free economic zones to make them more attractive for investment. Kim Ji-yeon reports.
The Korean government is easing regulations on its 8 free economic zones to increase the number of developers and thereby make it less of a pain for businesses to invest there. The Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy says it will lower the minimum requirement of developmental areas from the previous 330 to 200 square meters. The move will also give investors a higher rate of return, as the minimum reinvestment rate is being lowered from 25% to 10% of the profits generated from operating within the zones. Given the benefits, the move is expected to boost the number of private investors, as landowners and their associations will now be able to participate as developers of the zones. The ministry says it plans to raise $20 billion worth of economic benefit from the zones over the next 10 years. There are currently 88 districts within the 8 free economic zones in Korea. A zone in Chungbuk and the East Coast Free Economic Zone were added to the list last year as part of efforts to revive the local economy. But despite a number of measures introduced over the years, more than 40% of the districts are currently undeveloped due to low participation. Kim Ji-yeon, ARIRANG News.
Now shifting gears, Hyundai Motor and Kia Motors have been hit with a large fine by the U.S. government. They've agreed to pay $100 million in fines and forfeit $200 million worth of carbon credits for misleading customers about the fuel economy of many of their cars sold in the U.S. Shin Se-min reports.
Hyundai Motor and Kia Motors have been hit with a record fine of a combined $350 million in United States for overstating fuel economy standards on more than 1 million automobiles. That was a settlement reached on Monday between the Korean Auto Group and U.S. authorities. The fine itself amounts to $100 million. Under the terms, Hyundai and Kia will also forfeit greenhouse gas emission credits worth over $200 million and spend another $50 million on measures to prevent violations in the future. The penalty is the largest ever issued under the Clean Air Act. David Zuchowski, the president and chief executive officer of Hyundai Motor America, said in a statement that his company had acted transparently, reimbursed affected customers, and fully cooperated with the investigation, and that the company was pleased to put the issue behind them. This week's settlement comes 2 years after Hyundai and Kia conceded that they had overstated fuel efficiency standards by between 1 to 6 miles per gallon for a 2-year period on automobiles sold in the U.S. They agreed at the time to compensate drivers of the affected automobiles by issuing debit cards. That admission came after the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency investigated more than a dozen Hyundai and Kia models for fuel efficiency discrepancies in response to consumer complaints. Shin Se-min, ARIRANG News.
Now on the country's economic front, Korea is expected to post its largest ever trade surplus for all of this year on the back of falling global oil prices. The Trade Ministry says the cumulative surplus in the January to October period stood at $36.7 billion, and that's more than $1 billion higher than the same period last year. Korea posted a record yearly surplus of $44.1 billion in 2013. The Korea Center for International Finance says that global oil prices have fallen by around 25% over the last 4 months alone. And it's not just oil prices, but raw materials in general that have been dropping like a stone in recent months as concerns mount over an economic slowdown in major economies. The Korea Center for International Finance says that prices of gold also dropped 2.6% as of the end of last month from a year earlier, while that of corn went down more than 10%. Analysts attribute the fall to a lack of demand in the world market compared to excessive supply. They say prices will remain low for the time being. And the falling crude prices are also leading Korea's inflation rate to remain in the 1% range, where it's been now for 2 years. Statistics Korea says that prices grew 1.2% last month from the previous year. That marks a rebound for the first time in 4 months in October, but falls well below the central bank's inflation target band of 2.5% to 3.5%. The agency also attributes the slow growth to falling prices of fresh farm produce. And here in Korea, the number of one-person households has been on the rise in recent years as an increasing number of young people choose to delay or even prefer to live alone. This relatively new demographic has sparked off a so-called solo economy and a wave of new consumer trends. Park Ji-won reports.
Single-person households now make up more than 25% of Korea's total households. Statistics Korea says the ratio will increase to 1 in 3 by 2035. The rising number of singles in the country has begun to make an impression on the economy, and their distinct lifestyle is changing the landscape of the consumer market. For example, home appliance companies have been keen to cater to their special needs, rolling out products like mini rice cookers and small-load washing machines to slimmer refrigerators. The businesses say solo dwellers prefer appliances that are well-equipped with multi-functions in refined and compact designs. Increased revenues for convenience stores is another indication of the growing presence of single-person households. Recent statistics by the Bank of Korea show the amount of credit card transactions from January to July at convenience stores this year has increased about 15% from the same period last year, while large chain retailers saw a decrease, largely due to a slump in consumer spending after the April fair disaster. Analysts say an increase in sales for convenience stores is closely linked to the purchasing habits of single people. The purchasing power of solo dwellers has turned out to be stronger than that of 3 to 4 member households, according to the Korea Chamber of Commerce and Industry. As the country's population of single people continues to grow, so has demand for single-person housing units and personal finance managers to help them prepare for their senior years alone. Park Ji-won, ARIRANG News.
And now moving on to some international news. One of Japan's best-known writers has taken his own country to task for denying responsibility for the atrocities carried out by the Japanese military during wartime. He also provided insights into where the thinking may originate. Kim Min-ji reports.
Japanese writer Haruki Murakami has condemned his country for trying to evade responsibility for its wartime atrocities. In an interview with Japan's Mainichi Shimbun, Murakami noted that next year marks the 70th year since the end of World War II, but that Tokyo continues to miss the point that it was the assailant. Citing the Japanese way of thinking in regards to the war, the writer says that the Japanese believed they were the victims and that the emperor was exploited and its citizens deceived. Murakami added that eventually it was concluded that no one was wrong and that he understood why China and Korea feel resentment towards Japan today. Murakami says he saw similarities in the 2011 Fukushima Daiichi nuclear accident. He said that Japan did not look into who was really responsible and instead placed the blame on the earthquake and tsunami, believing they were all victims. Murakami, one of Japan's best-known authors and a longtime candidate for the Nobel Prize in Literature, is famous for bestsellers including Norwegian Wood and the 1Q84 trilogy. Kim Min-ji, ARIRANG News.
A chunk of government posts are up for grabs in midterm elections in the U.S., where polling stations will open in a few hours. Voters will cast ballots for 1/3 of the Senate seats and all of the House seats. Many see the election as a referendum on President Barack Obama. Connie Lee reports.
Voters in the U.S. are gearing up to cast their ballots in the midterm elections on Tuesday.
It's an election seen as a poll on President Barack Obama.
These midterm elections are an up or down vote on President Obama in terms of his stewardship of the economy, what's going on in foreign policy, and also his overall popularity.
Many races are tight or too close to call, but recent polls have been forecasting Republican gains, with many showing them taking charge of both the House of Representatives and the Senate. Voters will be electing candidates for all 435 seats in the House and 36 seats in the Senate. If Republicans hold on to their current seats and add 6 more in the House, they will hold a majority and make it a tough final 2 years for the Obama administration. On the issue of the economy, a Pew Research Center poll shows more voters believe the Republicans would do a better job than President Obama.
I don't think he's done a good job for what he said, and I don't think he was ever going to do a good job.
But there are others who think the president has a decent record.
I love him. He's doing all right. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be where I'm at today.
President Obama, supporting Democratic candidates at a rally in Illinois, reminded voters of his administration's achievements.
Over the past 4.5 years, our businesses have created more than 10 million new jobs. Housing market that was reeling is now rebounding. Auto industry that was wheezing is now roaring back.
The Ebola crisis and America's involvement in the fight against Islamic State are also factors likely to affect this year's midterms. Connie Lee, ARIRANG News.
And 13 years after New York City's World Trade Center collapsed in the 9/11 attacks, one World Trade Center has opened its doors for business. At 541 meters tall, the skyscraper is the tallest in the Western Hemisphere. Its first tenant, publishing giant Condé Nast, has begun to move in and will occupy 24 floors of the 104-story structure. More than half of the space has been leased, and the city's General Services Administration has signed up for a lot of floor space as well. One World Trade Center also keeps the footprints of the old Twin Towers as a memorial in addition to a museum. The United States has tightened security screening for travelers from countries under the U.S. visa waiver program in a bid to prevent foreign fighters from Syria and Iraq entering the country. U.S. Secretary of Homeland Security Jay Johnson says people from countries under the waiver program will have to provide additional information on an electronic application before they are allowed into the country. The move is in response to security threats from foreign fighters holding Western passports, which enables them to travel with relative ease to Europe and the U.S. There are almost 40 European and Asian countries under the U.S. visa waiver program, including Korea. And Korea is the 25th best country to live in, at least according to a British think tank. Its latest index notes Korea's economy and education, but says they would be well served to learn from countries like Norway and Switzerland in other areas. Kwon So-ah reports.
South Korea is the 25th most prosperous country out of 142 countries around the world, according to a Prosperity Index report released by the British-based Legatum Institute. This year's ranking is a notch higher than last year. Korea's best ranking was 24th in 2011. Norway topped the list for the 6th consecutive year. It was followed by Switzerland and New Zealand. The 3 most prosperous Asian countries are Singapore, Japan, and Hong Kong. The report says South Korea is the 5th best Asian country to live in. African nations filled out the majority of the bottom spots, with the Central African Republic propping up the rest. While GDP is usually the most common way to assess a country's prosperity level, the Legatum report says its definition of prosperity is more than, quote, just the accumulation of material wealth. That's why the institute measures countries by 8 categories. Korea performs strongly in economy and education, ranking 9th and 15th respectively. But the personal freedom and social capital divisions are weak.
Korea remains stuck in the mid-20 level because of its overall welfare situation. In terms of welfare systems, Korea is still an awfully long way behind countries like Norway and Switzerland, which are famous for their comprehensive welfare systems.
스위스라든가 이런.
But analysts have expressed optimism that the government's latest efforts to improve its welfare policies could boost Korea's position on the Prosperity Index list in the coming years. Kwon So-ah, ARIRANG News.
And although Korea may be considered one of the best countries to live in, that might not be as true for children living here. A nationwide survey on about 4,000 households with children under the age of 18 found that Korean children and teenagers were the least satisfied with their lives among OECD member countries. Korea scored just over 60 points on a scale of 100. The Netherlands came in first at 94.2 points, followed by Iceland and Finland. Korea's welfare ministry says the dissatisfaction stems from pressure to do well in school, bullying, violence, and internet addiction. And a massive Buddha painting has recently been unveiled to the public here in Korea at the National Museum. That is the 9th edition to the large Buddha scroll painting series, and our Im Yoon-hee takes us to the rare exhibition.
Standing at more than 1,300 meters tall, roughly the height of a 5-story building, centuries ago this painting once served as a focus of worship for outdoor Buddhist rituals. The Gaebul is a hanging scroll of the Buddha, and this large and ancient version is originally from the Gaeamsa Temple, located at Mount Nunga in the province of Jeollanam-do. It's a rare sight for a Gaebul of this size to be shown to the public.
If you look at the history of the Gaeamsa Temple until its chief Buddhist monk in 1941, you'll see no other previous records of such large hanging scrolls.
Records show that until the 19th century, this Gaebul was actively being used by monks in religious rituals. And now the towering painting is designated as National Treasure number 1269 and treated as a priceless historical artifact that will be preserved for generations to come. Im Yoon-hee, ARIRANG News.
Happy Tuesday, everyone. I'm Kim Bo-kyung with the weather updates. Although we got off to a rather cold start to the morning here in Korea, at the moment we are enjoying warm and bright conditions nationwide due to a high pressure front from the West Sea. Do keep in mind that the big gap in temperatures between the day and night will continue, but thanks to warm autumn sunshine, temperatures are back to the seasonal average range, which is about 2 to 3 degrees higher compared to yesterday. And at the moment, a dry weather watch is in effect for parts of Gangwon-do and Gyeonggi-do provinces as well as Seoul, so make sure to stay hydrated and be extra careful when dealing with fire. Looking ahead now, temperature should continue to be on the rise for tomorrow, so it would be a good idea to soak up some of that vitamin D. And other than that, showers are forecast for the eastern coast and Jeju towards the end of the week. On to the readings. Seoul reaches 18, cities down south also make it to 18. On to other regions, Daejeon and Jeju hit 16, Dokdo 15, Myeongkang peaks at 8. That's all the updates I have for Korea, and here's a look at the international weather.
And that's all for now. I'll be back with more updates at 6 p.m. Korea time. Stay tuned and thanks for watching.